All right, ready for another deep dive? Today we're getting our hands dirty, well, metaphorically speaking.
Always up for a bit of metaphorical digging.
It's all about crop protection. We'll be using Farmanaut's Handbook, and let me tell you, this thing's extensive.
A plant's best friend.
Totally. It's easy to forget how much goes on behind the scenes from farm to table and all that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about the big farms either. Even if you've just got a little tomato plant on your balcony.
Exactly. Healthy plants, bigger yields, less waste. Plus, tougher crops that can roll with those climate change punches, which benefits all of us, really.
Resilience. We need more of it in our gardens and in life in general.
And that's where Farmanaut comes in, emphasizing just how crucial plant health really is. They go deep on everything that can go wrong, like those leaf diseases every gardener, even beginners, have probably come across,
Yep.
like powdery mildew.
Ugh, the bane of every gardener's existence, right?
That white, powdery coating, it's like the common cold, but for plants.
It spreads like wildfire, too, especially when it's humid. Those fungal spores are everywhere, just waiting for the right moment to strike. And it's not picky leaves, stems, even fruit can get it.
Talk about a party pooper. And for anyone growing grapes, apples, or even just zucchini, it can ruin your whole harvest. Farmanaut talks about something called integrated pest management, IPM, a more holistic approach. But before we jump into solutions, what about those other leafy foes? Leaf spot diseases, what are those all about?
Think of them like the measles of the garden, spreading through those splashes of water, a gust of wind. You'll see spots, maybe a yellowish halo around them.
Ah, I've definitely seen that before. What causes it?
All sorts of culprits.
Yeah.
Fungi, bacteria, you name it.
So how do you stop it?
Prevention's your best bet. Rotating those crops, keeping things tidy, no piles of diseased plants just hanging around.
Good hygiene, even in the garden. Makes sense.
Exactly. And if you absolutely have to, fungicides or bactericides can be used strategically.
So it's like playing detective, right? Figuring out what's causing the problem and then deciding the best way to tackle it. What about viruses? Those can be a real pain, even for us humans.
Plants feel the viral wrath too. Take mosaic viruses, for instance. They leave this mottled pattern on the leaves.
Kind of like an abstract art piece.
Right. But not the kind of art you want on your prize-winning tomatoes, that's for sure.
Definitely not. I'm noticing a pattern here. Are insects often involved in spreading these diseases?
More often than you'd think. They become these little vectors carrying those teeny tiny infectious agents from plant to plant. That's why keeping those pests in check is so important for crop protection.
Right. And speaking of pests, let's talk about the ones everyone loves to hate. Aphids. Those tiny terrors seem to find their way into everyone's garden at some point.
Tell me about it. They multiply faster than rabbits. One minute they're not there, and the next they're all over your plants, sucking the life out of them.
Hiding under leaves, causing them to curl up.
And don't even get me started on that sticky honeydew they leave behind.
Insult to injury, right? But at least there are ways to deal with them. Please tell me there are.
Oh, absolutely. Ladybugs, for instance, those are their natural enemies. And you can use insecticidal soap or neem oil, which disrupts their life cycle.
Okay, good to have some options because those aphids are persistent. And what about scale insects? I've heard that name, but they sound intense.
Imagine this, a tiny little armored tank latched onto your plant stem, just draining the life out of it.
Okay, that's a visual I could have lived without. How do you even notice something that small?
They look like little bumps on the stems and leaves. You'll notice the plant starts to yellow, weaken.
So what can you do?
Horticultural oils work well, essentially suffocating them. And pruning any infested parts helps too.
Right, gotta stop it from spreading. Then there are those fruit flies, every fruit basket's worst nightmare. Farmanaut actually mentions one I wasn't so familiar with, the codling moth. What's the deal with those?
They're the stuff of nightmares for apple and pear growers, that's for sure.
So those wormy apples with the tunnels leading to the core, that's them.
Bingo.
Ew, not a fan. So what can you do?
Pheromone traps can be effective. They basically mess with the moth's mating rituals. And sometimes you might need to use insecticides strategically.
Not ideal, but sometimes necessary, I guess.
Exactly. But there are other things you can do too, like good orchard sanitation, removing fallen fruit, pruning affected branches. All that helps disrupt their life cycle.
So it's about staying one step ahead, being proactive. Makes sense. But it's not just diseases and creepy crawlies that cause trouble, right? Farmanaut also mentions nutrient deficiencies.
Oh, for sure.
Oh.
Just like us, plants need a balanced diet. Even a small deficiency can throw things off. And you'd be surprised how often even experienced gardeners get caught off guard by something like a nitrogen deficiency.
Really? So what happens when a plant isn't getting enough nitrogen?
You'll see those older leaves start to yellow. That's the plant trying to prioritize, sending whatever nitrogen it has left to the new growth.
Oh no, like
Oh.
sacrificing the elders for the young ones?
Pretty much. It's a gradual decline, but if you don't catch it early, it could be a real problem.
So what can you do? Is it too late at that point?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Applying nitrogen-rich fertilizers can help, or even using cover crops, they add nitrogen to the soil naturally.
Speaking of things that sound alarming, Farminaut also mentions blossom and rot. That can't be good.
It's not ideal, that's for sure.
What is it exactly?
It's common in tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, that family of plants. And the weird thing is, it's not a disease. Not really. It's a calcium deficiency.
So even with perfectly healthy soil, you can still have problems.
Exactly. Often it comes down to inconsistent watering. Even if there's enough calcium in the soil, if it dries out too much, the plant just can't absorb it properly.
So consistent watering is key.
Exactly. Consistent moisture, using mulch to retain it and regulate the soil temperature, all of that helps the plant take up the calcium it needs.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The interconnectedness of it all. It's like this delicate dance between the plant, the soil, the water, even us gardeners. And speaking of interconnectedness, Farminaut briefly touches on some emerging threats, things that seem to be getting worse because of climate change.
Yeah, it's a growing concern. Climate change is messing with pest and disease patterns globally. Take the fall armyworm, for instance. They become a huge problem for farmers all over the world, especially maize crops.
Armyworm already sounds scary enough. What makes them so bad?
They're voracious eaters, wiping out entire fields and causing huge losses for farmers. It's a real problem.
That's awful. Is there anything that can be done?
Early detection is crucial. And sometimes you need targeted insecticides or biological controls, but obviously those come with their own challenges. The real hope is that researchers can develop resistant crop varieties. That's where a lot of the research is focused right now.
Fingers crossed they can find a solution, because that sounds pretty dire. Farminaut also mentions citrus screening, which sounds equally concerning. I mean, who doesn't love citrus?
Right. But sadly, citrus greening is a major threat to citrus crops globally. It's a bacterial disease spread by this tiny insect, the Asian citrus psyllid.
So another pest causing trouble.
Pretty much. A lot of the focus is on controlling that insect because, unfortunately, there's no cure for the disease itself yet.
So the research continues. It really highlights how important it is to keep learning and adapting in agriculture. Now, one thing that struck me about Farminaut is their emphasis on sustainable pest and disease management. It feels like a more harmonious approach, working with nature rather than against it.
Absolutely. They're big proponents of integrated pest management, or IPM.
I touched on that earlier, but for those who missed it, what does that actually look like?
It's about combining different strategies, using a mix of tools to manage pests and diseases while minimizing the impact on the environment.
So what kind of tools are we talking about?
It can be as simple as choosing disease-resistant plant varieties, making sure there's enough space between plants for good airflow.
So they don't get all sweaty and attract those pesky bugs.
Exactly. Crop rotation is another big one, as is introducing natural predators like those ladybugs we talked about earlier.
So you're creating this whole little ecosystem in your garden. I like it. But are there times when you just can't avoid using those chemical controls?
Sometimes, yeah, you just have to. But the idea is to use them sparingly, only as a last resort.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Exactly.
Now, Farminaut seems to be all about pushing boundaries, especially when it comes to technology. I mean, they're talking about using satellite imagery and artificial intelligence. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It's pretty wild. They literally monitor crop health from space.
From space. Okay, now you have to tell me more. How does that even work? Okay, so we're talking satellites, AI, crop monitoring from space.
Right.
Seriously, how does that actually work?
It's pretty amazing. They have these satellites, right? They take pictures of entire fields. And then the AI comes in. These algorithms analyze the images, looking for the tiniest changes.
Changes, like what?
We're talking subtle shifts in color, shape, even temperature. Things our eyes would never pick up on.
It's like having a whole team of microscopic plant doctors examining every inch of the field. What's the main advantage of that compared to, someone actually walking through the fields?
Early detection. That's the game changer. A lot of times, by the time we notice a problem with our own eyes, it's already taken root, so to speak.
Yeah.
But these satellites, They can pick up on stress, disease, nutrient deficiencies way before they're visible to us.
So you can address the issue before it becomes a full-blown crisis. Do they have any examples of this in action, real-world success stories?
Oh, tons. One that comes to mind is an apple orchard that was struggling with, you guessed it, codling moths. Those things are relentless.
The worst. It's like they have a GPS for finding the perfect apple.
Right. This farmer had tried everything, pheromone traps, insecticides, you name it. Nothing seemed to work. But then they started using this satellite monitoring, and the satellites were able to detect these really subtle changes in the foliage, indicating the presence of codling moth larvae.
Wait, so before the moths even did any visible damage to the apples?
Exactly. It's like they could predict where those moths were going to strike next.
That's incredible. What did the farmer do with that information?
They were able to target their treatments with incredible precision. Instead of blanketing the entire orchard with insecticides, they just sprayed the affected areas.
Saving money and minimizing the environmental impact. I like it. Okay, I need to hear another one. This technology is blowing my mind.
Okay, let's switch gears from apples to grapes. Imagine a vineyard, right? And they're battling powdery mildew, which, as we discussed, is a constant headache for grape growers.
I can only imagine.
This vineyard manager is really committed to sustainable practices, trying to use as few fungicides as possible. So they start using Pharmanaut's system, and they get these incredible satellite maps of their vineyard.
What do the maps show?
They're color-coded to show vine health.
So like a traffic light system for your plants.
Exactly. Green means everything's good, yellow means caution, and red means you've got a problem on your hands.
I like it. Simple, easy to understand. So what happened with the vineyard?
Well, the satellite images started picking up on these small pockets of yellow, indicating stress, in a particular section of the vineyard. But here's the thing. It wasn't even powdery mildew yet.
What was it then?
Turns out there was a problem with the irrigation system in that specific area. It wasn't delivering enough water.
Wow. So the vines were essentially sending out an SOS signal and the satellites picked it up. That's amazing.
Right. They were able to pinpoint the problem early on.
So what did they do?
They fixed the irrigation system, and because they caught it early, the vines were covered without needing any fungicide treatments at all.
Wow, a real testament to the power of early detection. But what about those massive farms? Thousands of acres. Can satellites realistically monitor something that vast?
That's where this technology really shines. It's not just about the scale of coverage, but the speed as well. In large-scale agriculture, timing is everything.
Makes sense. You've got to act fast to contain an outbreak.
Exactly. By the time traditional scouting methods detect a problem, it might be too late to do anything. But with Pharmanaut, farmers get near real-time alerts. They can see what's happening and take action immediately.
So it's not just about reacting, it's about anticipating problems.
Precisely. And it's not just about disease and pest control either. The data from these satellites can help farmers make better decisions about irrigation, fertilizer application, even when to harvest for optimal yield.
So they're fine-tuning every aspect of the growing process based on what the satellites are seeing. It's incredible. But surely there must be some limitations with a technology this advanced.
Of course, nothing's perfect. One of the biggest challenges is ensuring the accuracy of the data.
What do you mean?
Well, satellite images can be affected by all sorts of things. Cloud cover, atmospheric conditions, even the angle of the sun can interfere with the readings.
So it's like trying to solve a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing or blurry.
In a way, yes. But the good news is that the AI is constantly evolving. The algorithms are getting smarter all the time, better at filtering out that noise and giving us a clear picture, even with those imperfect conditions.
That's reassuring, but let's be real, all this cutting-edge tech has to come at a price. Is it accessible? Can the average farmer actually afford it?
It's a valid concern, and it's something that Pharmanaut is actively addressing. They're working hard to make their system affordable for everyone, not just large-scale operations.
So democratizing access to this technology, I like the sound of that.
Exactly. Their goal is to empower farmers everywhere, regardless of their budget, because this technology has the potential to benefit everyone.
Absolutely. But what about data privacy? That's a big concern with any kind of data collection these days.
For sure. It's an important conversation, and it's something that Pharmanaut seems to be taking seriously. They use encryption, strict security protocols, and they're very transparent about how they use and share data.
Transparency is key for building trust. Good to know. Were there any other concerns that came up in your research? Anything that gave you pause?
One that I hear a lot is the fear of job displacement. If technology can do the work of human scouts, what happens to those jobs? It's understandable, but I think it's important to remember that technology is a tool.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Right, exactly. It's not about replacing people, but about enhancing our capabilities. Instead of spending hours walking fields, imagine farmers using this data to pinpoint the exact areas that need their attention. It frees up their time and resources so they can focus on what they do best.
It's about using technology to support and amplify human expertise, not to replace it entirely. And who knows, maybe it even creates new jobs in the process.
Absolutely. Developing these systems, analyzing the data, providing support to farmers, these are all skilled positions that could bring new opportunities to the agricultural sector.
So instead of fearing change, it's about adapting, evolving, and seeing the potential for something new. We've talked about the amazing possibilities of Pharmanaut's technology and addressed some valid concerns. But it seems like they're not just focused on the here and now, they have a vision for the future of crop protection. And I, for one, am very curious to hear it.
Well, get ready for some next level stuff because Pharmanaut's predictions are truly fascinating. We're about to take a giant leap into the future of farming.
All right, you mentioned fascinating predictions. Something about the future of crop protection. Don't hold back.
Remember those satellites and AI we've been talking about? That's just the tip of the iceberg. Pharmanaut believes the future is all about precision, prediction, and get this, personalization.
Personalization. Are we giving each plant its own care plan now?
You got it. Imagine sensors in the soil constantly monitoring everything. Moisture levels, nutrients, even the earliest signs of disease.
Okay, that's pretty high tech. What else?
Drones. But not just any drones, these would have hyperspectral cameras.
Hyperspectral cameras. That sounds intense.
They're like superhuman vision for drones. They can see wavelengths of light that are invisible to us, revealing hidden problems within the plants themselves.
So we're basically giving each plant its own personal physician, with all the latest gadgets for diagnosis and treatment.
And it's not just about identifying problems, but treating them with incredible precision. Think nanobots delivering tiny doses of fertilizers or pesticides exactly where the plant needs it.
Nanobots. Okay, now you're just messing with me.
I'm serious. It's all about minimizing waste, maximizing effectiveness, and being much gentler on the environment.
Okay, I'll bite. Nanobots in my tomatoes. What's next? Self-healing crops. Is that even a real possibility?
It's closer than you think. Scientists are using gene editing to boost a plant's natural defenses, basically teaching it to heal itself.
So are we talking about crops that can resist disease and pests completely on their own? That's pretty incredible if they can pull it off.
It's all about tapping into the power of nature itself, giving plants the tools they need to thrive in our rapidly changing world.
It's definitely exciting stuff. But I have to admit, part of me wonders about the potential downsides. Are we putting all our eggs in the technology basket? What happens to all the traditional knowledge farmers have relied on for centuries?
It's a valid concern, and something we need to be mindful of as these technologies become more widespread.
I don't think it's about replacing traditional knowledge, but finding a balance. We can use these tools to deepen our understanding, not to erase the wisdom of generations past.
It's about working with nature, not trying to control every single thing.
Absolutely. And that means supporting innovation at every level, from high-tech solutions like Pharmanauts to promoting and preserving traditional knowledge. Things like soil health, crop rotation, natural pest control. These practices are just as relevant today, maybe even more so as our climate changes.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness we talked about earlier. Hopefully we can find ways to make sure everyone, everywhere, has the knowledge and tools they need to grow healthy food, regardless of their resources or access to technology. Exactly. It's about global food security, sustainability. It's a challenge and an opportunity for all of us.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? As we enter this new era in agriculture, what are you personally most hopeful about?
I'm hopeful for a future where we can grow more food with less impact, where we're guided by data and a deep respect for the natural world, a future where everyone has access to nutritious food.
Now that's a future I can get behind. It's been an incredible journey exploring the world of crop protection with you today. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Just this. Never underestimate the power of a single seed. It has the potential to nourish, to heal, to connect us to the earth and to each other. Let's use our knowledge, our passion, and yes, our technology to help those seeds grow and create a brighter future for all.
Beautifully said. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of crop protection. We hope you've learned something new and feel inspired to keep asking questions, stay curious, and keep learning. Until next time.
Keep growing.